Hello, Brubs. We're back with what's his book called? The Sorcerer's Apprentice by Heinz Ewers, a 1927 translation of the book by. Let me turn on the light. By Ludwig Levison, illustrated by Mablon Blaine. Well, we're going to have a sneezing fit, apparently. I haven't really sneezed in like a week, now that I think of it. All right, chapter 10. Don't know where this sudden sneeze, probably from this body armor. Chapter 10. What avails the high priest's prayer for rain if the rabbi Shaninabar Dosa can counteract it? The Talmud, Joma, whatever that is, FOL 53, Tanith 24. I'm guessing that's the chapter of the Talmud, like the Bible. All right, let's get on with this. There's the drop cap. Another demon. Frank Braun threw a glance upon his disordered bed. It's kind of like mine. He was certain that he would be able to sleep no more. Morning came, and its consumptive pallor blended with the green light of the lamp. Oh, this pale glimmer of the early morning before the sun was up. Oh, this cold, disconsolate light, born before its time. He dressed mechanically, trembling and fever-shaken. Then he went down the stairs. Whither should he go? He did not care if only it were away from Val d'Escodra. He went into the guest room and wrote on a piece of paper, "I have gone to the city." No, he would delay no longer. He would go at once. On foot, he could always have his things sent for. He laid the paper on the table and passed through the door. The light hurt him, and he closed his eyes. He sighed deeply and went on his way. He felt empty, full of aches, thoroughly wretched, like this limp air which the early wind brought. He climbed up the mountains hastily, mechanically, step by step. He scarcely knew whither he was going and why he was going. He went on. It was mere motion and nothing else, a climbing, a striding, upward through the dew-drenched bushes. There was a fog about him that laid itself with a chill pressure on his breast. It pained him to draw breath. Then he stood still and reflected, but he had difficulty in collecting his thoughts and did not know what it was that he was trying to think about. Finally, he observed that he had passed by the mountain path a while ago. He had to turn back, for this was the way to Samigo. But he had no desire to go back. Then I'll simply go to Samigo, he thought. He did not look to the right or to the left, but ran on, silently, unthinking, breathing heavily. He merely followed the path for hours. Day came, but the sun did not shine forth through the thick clouds. It was cold up there, and yet a hot perspiration drenched his skin. Then he recalled that the guard had spoken of a charcoal burner's hut, but he could not find it. So he ran on. He saw a goat's trail run down a ravine to his left and followed it. It will shorten the way, he thought. Then he ran about at random and lost the path. He crept down the slopes and descended into the valley, down again and then up. But his feet ached, and he felt sharp pains in his lungs at each breath. He sat down under a stunted fir tree. He wanted to rest for just a moment and leaned his back against the tree trunk. A white wheel revolved in his head, and he fell over on one side. When he awoke, he was miserably cold. A drizzling rain fell and wet him through to the skin. It seemed long past noon, and he jumped up hastily. Now he ran to warm himself a little, and began again to seek the path. Since he could not find it, he determined just to go straight ahead and to keep, so far as possible, on the elevation on which he was at present. Thus he dragged himself up. Once it occurred to him that he might call for help. Perhaps some shepherd might be near. But he forgot the notion immediately. Weary, unthinking, worn out, he dragged himself along for hours and hours. Then twilight fell, and he made his last exertion. He leaped and ran. Now he called out too, but no one heard him. When it was dark, he sat down on a stone. It is a matter of indifference, he thought. Whether I sit or run now, I will wait here. Perhaps someone will come. You think it's boring, bruv? I think you're boring, Baba. From far below in the ravine there came a soft sound. He listened intently and recognized it. Goat bells. He now cried out again, but he received no answer, not even an echo. Repeated his own words. I must get down there, he thought. He arose, but his limbs had grown so stiff that he could scarcely move them. I must get down there, he repeated. I must get down there. He climbed down. It was very dark. This helped him and made him blind to any danger. He caught hold of the edges of the cliff and of spurge bushes. Sometimes his foot slipped. He would glide for long distances. Sometimes, too, he fell. Once he fell on his forehead and cut himself, so that the blood came. He tore his hands and face on the prickly broom. Hello, brovs. Below there were more bushes. He made his way through them as well as he could. He cried out again, but he heard no answer, and the herd of goats, too, must long ago have passed on its way. The ravine was narrow and descended rapidly. He came upon a torrent and stepped into it. He shoved and groped his way on, sometimes creeping on all fours. Then he saw suddenly, not far below him, a few lights. He looked to the right and to the left, and at last found the goat path, which ran parallel to the brook. He followed it, and so emerged from the narrow ravine. He beat at the door of the first lonely hut, and begged for shelter, but the old woman would not open the door, and cried at him through the window that he was to go away. What's the name of the village? He asked, but she closed the window. He went on, and on the road he met a peasant with an ox cart. From him he learned that he was very near Samigo. Then drive me to the frontier guard's house, he said. The peasant was unwilling. Then he put his hand in his pocket and gave him money. It was only now that he observed that his garments hung from him in tatters. But he did not even laugh any longer. Well, I'll be damned, cried Herr Alois Drenker. I'll be damned. Is it you? I thought I was getting, as a lodger, a tramp of the worst sort. He assisted him from the ox cart and put his hands under his arms when he saw how he faltered. What ails you? He asked, frightened. I believe I have a little fever, said Frank Braun. The guard nodded. It looks like that to me, too. He helped him in and called for a maidservant. He set the sick man on a chair and undressed him carefully. Then he washed away the dirt and the blood with hot water, which the maid fetched in a wooden pail. He gave him a clean shirt and helped him to bed. Frank Braun saw nothing but these large, clumsy hands which touched him here and there, tenderly, almost maternally, with infinite care. They were red and hard, but kind, strong hands that were apt for any work, and he felt secure and well cared for in these hands. The guard stepped to his bedside and gave him a tall glass. Here, he said, grog, that'll do you good. Drink it while it's hot. He was not satisfied until his friend had emptied the glass. He brought him a second glass and a third and made him drink without stopping. It's the best remedy, he laughed. You can stake your life on that. It's the best. Frank Braun sank back. He wanted to thank him, but his tongue was heavy and refused to work. He stammered a few sounds, then he fell asleep. The guard sat beside his bed when he woke up. The fever seemed to have vanished, and he felt fresh enough, but when he wanted to get up, he staggered and had to lie down again. We'll have dinner in a moment, said the guard. I'll see whether the food is done. You are sure to be hungry. He was, wildly and fiercely. He looked about. His bed occupied one wall of the small room with one window. In the middle stood a table and a couple of chairs. Against the other wall was a clothes press on which two stuffed owls gathered the dust. The walls were closely hung with old swords, muskets, and pistols, between which pipes and powder horns showed up bravely. Alois Drinker brought him chicken soup. Cooked it myself, he cried proudly. He served eggs and chicken, and with them strong red wine, and he was happy to see his patient enjoy it so much. I must ride out now, he said, but you must promise that you'll continue to lie here quietly. Frank Braun promised. The fever returned. Now he would sleep a little, now lie bathed in perspiration. Toward evening he grew a little quieter, yet he remained excited and almost sleepless during the night. Then again he became unconscious and remained thus for 2 days. When he woke up he saw that the guard had put cold cloths on his forehead. Drinker told him that he had been quite anxious and had called the priest. The latter had already paid 2 visits. It's always the best thing, he excused himself, in any event, and then, too, he knows a little medicine. Soon thereafter the priest appeared, a fat, bloated man, who took snuff and squinted. He said it seemed to be pneumonia, but was now almost conquered. Frank Braun didn't like him. He closed his eyes and pressed his ears against the pillows. When the priest had gone, he begged the guard not to admit him again. Alois Drinker laughed. I'm willing. If he's not needed, so much the better. He was really needed no longer. The fever declined, and with it the sharp pains in the chest. After a few days, Frank Braun could get up for some hours daily. The guard did what he could for his patient. He told him anecdotes about smugglers and was never tired of mixing fresh punch or hot spiced wine, and his remedies cured, that was not to be denied. Frank Braun told him about the miraculous healing of Sibylla Madruzo and also of the confession of Veneer's wife. The guard burst out, the dirty slut, and she even beat the child? He was enraged and declared that he would ride over at once and set things to rights. Frank Braun advised him to put it off for a while, but it was hard to make the guard realize that he could do the child only harm at present. Oh, nonsense, he cried, all this damned devil hunting rot. Unburnt wood ashes, that's the best cure for the whole craziness. I am no scholar, certainly, but I know what the apostle says. Shall I chastise you with a rod? Frank Braun replied, well, you'd only awaken their jubilation with a rod. That has become their daily bread in the valley of Skodra. Alois Drinker shook his head thoughtfully. What is a man to do then? Then he told about his adventure with Matilda Veneer. They made a fool of me. That's what they really did, he roared. She kept me through the nights in that damned hole of Val de Skodra, and in the meantime her husband smuggled fat bales of goods from San Poligio to Brescia. He knew very well indeed what his wife was doing, and I was the one who was taken in, and not he. She certainly didn't tell him any news in Mr. Peter's barn, not him. But I'll crack her skull if she so much as hurts a hair of the child's head. Frank Braun tried to calm him. He believed that Veneer was much more kindly disposed toward little Fiammetta than the mother herself. But the guard was not to be turned from his determination. He would ride there on the very next day and set things right in that confounded sty. But an official telegram prevented him. He was commanded to ride at once to Spologna, a little village close to the frontier. That means Falupio's band, he cried, the very one that Veneer used to belong to. Our captain is going to carry out some plan, you will see. He slipped into his boots. 5 minutes later, the iron hoofs of his horse were rattling along the small water-washed stones of the street. Frank Braun was alone. The old maidservant took care of him. The guard had laid his sword on the pillow. It was to serve as a call bell. Mightily he rattled with it on the floor when he wanted the maid. With some difficulty he procured a smooth board. This served him as a table when he was lying down. He ordered pen and ink to be brought him, and began to write again. It was like all science, a game, and like every game it was purposeless. One man played patience, and another deciphered cuneiform inscriptions. One man built up his view of the universe into a logical system, and another calculated how many times the letter A occurs in the Bible. It was simply a question of amusing oneself. Then, too, another element entered. He recognized now that his work, like all work, was purposeless and childish. But it had been begun, a chord had been struck, and it had to be resolved. Wasn't it Zelter to whom the little incident with the cobbler's apprentice happened? The boy sang continually the song from the Freischlutz. We are winding thee the Virgin's wreath, and he sang it over and over and over again, only this one line and no more. Zelter went behind him and cried out in a rage, "Of silk that's violet blue, of silk that's violet blue." Whereupon the boy called out to him, "If you want to sing the song about the Virgin's wreath, why in hell don't you start it yourself?" He laughed. God knows the cobbler's apprentice seemed to him more congenial than Goethe's friend. He was satisfied with this single line and had no further ambition. He did as he pleased and was a free man, but the poor Zelter was ridden by his particular Satan. He had to spin, you bastard, he had to spin the violet blue silk and was a wretched slave of his art. And Frank Braun knew well that it was quite useless to resist. One had to finish, one had to, and no stubbornness availed. He sighed, laughing, and continued to spin his silk of violet blue. The paleontologists play a game like the children's game at Easter. Their mother, Antiquity, has hidden pretty Easter eggs for them in the earth. And now these well-behaved children sniff around everywhere and look. When their mother cries cold, then they make a sad face. When she cries warm, then their eyes gleam. But it is an entrancing game, this science. The Neanderthal was found 50 years ago, and the enthusiasts cried out that here was the missing link, here was the ape man. This was the most beautiful Easter egg in the world, and he who found it was made king. But the envious ones said that he wasn't a genuine king at all. He was morbid, they said, and abnormal, names which, in all ages, the stupid have given to that which they did not understand. And they disputed, and the end of it was that they were both wrong. The Neanderthal man was a real man, but he wasn't the missing link. It was a lovely Easter egg, but not the big golden one. He was not the link of transition. That must have come long before his time, a matter of 1,000,000 years. It was certainly in the tertiary rocks, and there one would have to look for it. They sought and found all kinds of Easter eggs, but never the one that had been promised them, and so to pass the time they looked at these more closely. All the Neanderthal folk resembled the men of today. In one respect, the formation of the teeth. Ape-like, however, was the absence of a chin, and ape-like, too, the huge protuberances over the eyes. Therefore, one reasoned, the creature that really formed the transition and which one was seeking must have been more ape-like in these respects, too. Must have had a powerful gorilla-like snout and mighty eye-teeth. Ah, if one but knew where that precious egg lay. Since no one found it, one reflected further and advanced a good bit. It was discovered that the normal human set of teeth was the original, and this welcome rule was found to be confirmed everywhere. The mammals had begun with the normal set of teeth, and the main branch of the genus had kept it. It was only in the side branches that some special adaptation favored the development of one or another kind of tooth, the eye teeth, or the molars, or the incisors. Thus it was ascertained that man has the simple, original set of teeth, and their orangutan an abnormally developed one, and therefore man is the father of the great ape, and not vice versa. And it was concluded that if this be so, the treasure to be found in the tertiary must be still more ape-like than the Neanderthal man, but must have a human set of teeth. Thus, then, the original ancestor must have looked, features like an ape, but teeth like a man. The sons of this primeval man-ape, however, went separate ways. The well-bred Abel kept the teeth and laid aside the ape-like features. The wicked Cain, on the other hand, developed mightily the powerful teeth, and, as a punishment, lost in the direction of his skull and brain. The good children who played at paleontology painted pretty little pictures to represent the way the golden egg would look if ever they found it. And since they were so very good, their mother called them to Heidelberg and said, "Warm, warm!" And there, really, they found the egg and were infinitely proud and happy because it looked exactly as they had prophetically delineated it. They found the Heidelberg man. He was much more ape-like than the Neanderthal man, and yet had the simple human set of teeth. The good children said, "Aha," and put their fingers to their noses in derision at the others who had painted the wrong little pictures. Now the man of Heidelberg was the infinitely primeval ancestor, and from him and his brothers all the rest were descended. The Cro-Magnon giants, the people of Galley Hill, those of Grimaldi and of Neanderthal. Also, those Neanderthal people, how often as a boy he had climbed into that cave. The old ladder was decayed and broken, and the rope had rotted. That only heightened the charm, for it all seemed immensely dangerous. He had sat there and dreamed that he was the Neanderthal man, that he was being hunted and dared not stir in his hiding place. And in order to make his imaginings more real, he sang aloud the hymn of the persecuted. Praise ye the Lord, the mighty King of all honors. Praise him, O soul, at one with the heavenly choirs. Then, hearing voices below, he broke off and thought, there are the Siberi. But it was only his mother who was very much vexed, because every climb into the Neanderthal cavern cost a new pair of breeches. Later on, he had given up all interest in the pious hymn writer, but had all the more for that primitive creature whose name the poet bore. Now he borrowed a shovel and a spade from a farmhouse, or a hammer and an axe from the stonebreakers on the roadside. If there was one ape man, he thought, why shouldn't there be more? And he dug and sought zealously after the golden egg. He found nothing at all and stopped sadly when twilight fell, but he remained in his cavern when the shadows grew long, and his little wax candle flickered restlessly. He always looked at the narrow fissure in the side walls. No human being could force his way through, but one could throw stones far in, and he imagined that this cleft was infinitely long, and that one would creep along it for many hours into the bowels of the earth. But then it opened and grew more spacious and ended in a gigantic cavern, and out of this cavern one emerged into a deep valley. This was round like an ancient crater, and the cliff walls spanned it like a roof, and grew pointed in the form of a cone. Only in the middle, a hole showed the blue sky. Beneath it was a small lake. Mighty blades of shave grass grew on its shores, and forests of ferns extended to the slopes. Here the Neanderthal people dwelt. They had remained for thousands of years, fishing and hunting, fighting for their lives with the mighty saurians. Ah, if one could get through that cleft some day. With an unskilled pen, Frank Braun drew strange things on his paper. He had to write under each figure what it was meant to represent, or he would not himself have recognized it. So he wrote Brontosaurus and Plesiosaurus, or is it Plesiosaurus, and Neanderthaler. But he found after all that one of his primitive folk bore an extraordinary resemblance to Pietro Nascler, and that the other was not unlike Girolamo Scuro. Only the farmhand's set of teeth was the stronger. He had departed from the type and become more ape-like. The guard stayed away for 4 days. Frank Braun lay abed, writing and dreaming, and he enjoyed this quiet happiness of being a convalescent without having been really ill. At intervals he got up and went slowly through the streets of the old village. When the guard came back, he was leaning out of the window. "Well, did you make a good haul?" he called out to him. Alois Drenker jumped from his horse. "Oh, pshaw," he growled. "We lay in the rain for 4 nights for just nothing, absolutely nothing. Those fellows got wind of something, and we didn't see so much as a louse. But we'll get them yet." Frank Braun remained a few days longer with his host. He felt quite well again, but the guard didn't want to let him go. He said one shouldn't interrupt one's cure before the proper time, and he filled him with wine and out of comradeship partook vigorously of these excellent medicines. One morning early, he came to Frank Braun's bed. Now, he said, if you want to, you can ride with me. I have to go to the city and can take you along. Frank Braun hastened to get up. The maid brought him his breakfast. The horse was tethered in front of the house, but he did not see the guard. Where is Herr Drenker? He asked the maid. Gone ahead, she said. I was to tell you that you were not to hurry, and to breakfast in quiet. You will catch up with him by and by. He is waiting for you. His horse knows the way. He rode slowly up the mountains. Only after a full hour did he overtake the guard, who was afoot and gasping mightily. Well, and where is your horse? He asked, astonished. Drenker laughed. You are sitting on it. I am traveling on foot. Frank Braun wanted to dismount, but the guard would not suffer it. He took the horse by the bridle and led it. Well, old beast, you'll be quite satisfied to drag up the mountain 50 kilograms less than usual. But don't worry. By the time we get to Val d'Escodra, I'll be lighter by some kilograms, too. He gasped and sweated, but he took great strides in his heavy boots. It would be a fine thing if an old emperor's rifleman couldn't climb these hills any more. We went on quite different marches, I assure you, and in full field accoutrement. They rested under the peak of Peldo. Then they went on. On the road above the Skodra Valley, Frank Braun dismounted, and the guard lifted himself into the saddle. They shook hands with each other. Give my regards to that damned hole, the guard laughed. I'll be there within a few days, and you'll see how I show those good people what's what. What's what, not what. Then he rode away. Frank Braun sat down on the stone on which Sibylla was accustomed to sit. And so he was going back once more to the valley of Skodra. Hither he had fled almost 5 months before to a quiet hiding place, in which he was to be lost. And then again he had fled from himself. Ah, even in this remotest corner, the enemy found him. What more did he want in the village? He must drive away by the next stage. Every stone reminded him of his wretched defeat. Away! Just pack his trunks and get away. Anywhere. The devil hunters? How indifferent they were to him, and he wanted to play with this affair. Teresa. Ah, well, Teresa. Slowly he climbed down. Were they still shouting? He heard the dissonant sounds of the Americans' music and recognized the fasting song. Always the fasting song, he thought. Can't they sing anything else at all? But the noise did not come from the barn. It came from below, close by the lake. Were they going in a procession? He hastened his steps. Now he saw that they were all standing about Raimonde's house. Men, women, and children stood in a semicircle. The tailor, Ronchi, stood on a table and led the music. At his feet, little Fiammetta Veneer was playing. He made his way through the crowd, but no one paid any attention to him. What is it? He asked hastily, but they went on singing. In the doorway, he met young Ulpo and grasped his arm. What's going on here? He asked. The fellow looked at him in astonishment. Going on? We are adoring the saint. Then he ran out. The people stood thickly packed on the steps. In the guest room, Raimonde was filling large glasses with milk and raspberry juice, handing them around and receiving nickel coins in exchange. Where is Teresa? He called out to him. Raimonde looked up, did not understand, and nodded blankly, but a woman who stood in front of him gave him a look of hatred and said, Saint Teresa is upstairs. With difficulty, he made his way upstairs. Let me through, he begged. I must see her. Some paid no attention to him, but kept the places they occupied and continued to sing. But others crowded together as well as they could. He thrust and shoved. He had to fight his way through foot by foot. The singers fell silent. He now heard only a soft prayer and recognized Pietro's voice. He spoke in a low tone, almost whispering, and Frank Braun understood only isolated phrases. Gratitude to the Lamb, he heard, and a new wonderful grace, and the finger of the Lord. Let me through, he hissed. Let me through. At last he stood before her door. The room was packed with people, but they were all kneeling. so he could easily look across them. The room looked like a small chapel. In addition to the picture of the Madonna, there hung on the other side a picture of Saint Francis. How many pages do I get to go? 12 more pages? 10 more pages? Of Saint Francis. Beneath both burned large candles. The window was closed and was hung with white cloths, which supported by laths. Is that laths or yeah, it's got to be laths? Laths? Bent forward into a kind of canopy. Under it, on a chaste lounge of wicker work, Teresa rested. The light was rather dim, so that it took some time for his eyes to become accustomed to it. He saw the girl half sitting, half reclining, her eyes rigidly fixed on the crucifix, which the American held in front of her. A white garment covered her whole body. Her hands lay on the two arms of the chair. Her naked feet rested on a footstool beside which the dumb Gino was crouching. And Frank Braun beheld the great red stigmata upon her hands and feet. Pietro Nascler knelt down, bowed his head, and kissed devoutly the bloody scars upon her feet. He was followed by old Ulpo, and the latter by Matilda Veneer. They all pressed forward violently, but Girolamo Scuro kept order and thrust them back. He let the people approach from the left one by one, and then withdraw toward the right. There arose a pushing and a thrusting, but finally the crowd became orderly. Many had to leave the house, so that a path was formed in the hall and on the stairs. Now they went in a long single file through the house door, up the stairs, across the hall, into the room, in order to kiss the feet which bore the wounds of the Lord. Then they went back, down the stairs and out, pushing slowly with infinite patience. Frank Braun felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned around and saw Angelo with the key of his room. Quickly he slipped through the crowd, opened the door, and entered. There, everything lay just as he had left it 2 weeks ago. Not a book seemed disarranged. He went to the window and looked out into the evening. Below stood the crowd, waiting in file for a chance to enter. The blood rose hotly to his temples, and his thoughts became confused. He saw that something extraordinary had happened. Through him, in spite of him, he did not know. But it had happened, and was a great fulfillment. It was a miracle that promised many others. He sat still and heard the low, prayerful song of the people, but he did not grasp the words, and it was but a dull failing and rising of sound which lulled him strangely to rest. He sat still for a long time. A comforting warmth filled his heart, and his eyes gleamed, and his lips spoke fervently. Ah, my beloved bears the stigmata of the Lord. Then he saw a movement without. They all came out of the house and drew back. The tailor Ronchi and Giovanni Olpo ordered them. No one spoke a loud word, but all eyes were fixed in suspense on the door. Slowly and carefully they carried out the chair on which Teresa rested. 4 long poles were placed under it in the form of a cross, so that their ends protruded an equal distance, and 8 young lads took the burden on their shoulders. Thus they wandered off in a noiseless procession. Frank Braun looked after them, then he hastened down the steps. He ran through a side street and took up his position by the church in order to see them pass. The children ran ahead, now rushing back and again, standing for a moment and looking about. Then came the crippled cobbler, Lucilio Ratti, the village policeman. He wore his old leather helmet with a tall cockade and carried his short, polished saber across his shoulder. Next to him, twice his height, walked Scuro. The band of 9 men and 7 women followed them under the leadership of the tailor, but they did not play, and walked quietly and silently like all the others. Behind them went Pietro Nascler, accompanied by 2 old men. There followed the 8 lads who carried Teresa's chair. She held a crucifix in her lap, and her eyes were closed tight. Gino ran beside her with the little footstool, his left hand holding an end of her garment. Behind her came the women in a long procession, then the men. He looked after them. They went past the church, turned to the right, and proceeded to Pietro's meeting hall. Slowly he walked home. At the stable door, he met Angelo, who asked, laughing, "So, you are back again, sir?" "Yes," said Frank Braun, "as you see." He wanted to ask him what had happened, but he remembered that Angelo was not from hereabouts. So he only said, "Well, and you don't pay attention to anything." Angelo grinned. "What should I pay attention to?" Frank Braun went into the house and found the innkeeper in the guest room, counting his takings. He sat down beside him. "Now tell me, Raimondi, what has been going on here since I left?" The landlord poked around in a drawer and got out a bill. "You weren't here," he said, "but you didn't give notice." "I had the room locked at once. No one has been in it. I had to keep it vacant for you. Otherwise, I might easily have rented it to some other stranger." Frank Braun put his hand in his pocket. "Don't bother any further," he cried. "I am perfectly willing to pay. How much do you want?" He threw the money on the table. The innkeeper counted it and sighed. Why hadn't he asked more? "Business is good, it seems," asked Frank Braun. "The people are coming to you again." Raimondi nodded. It was a hard struggle. When that thing happened to Teresa, they came streaming back to the house, but no one wanted to eat or drink anything. So I declared to the American that I would let no one in. At the door, who did not take something. He preached to me at length, but I remained firm, and so we agreed. They don't drink wine here, these devil hunters, but they must take milk and fruit syrup. In addition, the American gets a quantity of wine through me, which he uses for the Lord's Supper. He shoved the money into the old leather bag, put it into a drawer, and turned the key. "If it goes this way every day, I'll be satisfied." Frank Braun said, "Well, you don't drink raspberry juice, do you? Go into the cellar and fetch a couple of bottles of Vino Santo. We'll drink, and you must tell me the whole story." When their glasses were filled, Raimondi lit his pipe. "Why am I to tell you?" he said. "Teresa has just gone and become a saint. I'm agreeable. It seems to be profitable, at least." He spat in a wide semicircle. Frank Braun stared at him. "It's profitable. But hadn't he, too, regarded the miracle valley of Scodra from this point of view? To be sure, he hadn't intended to content himself with selling milk for pennies. And wasn't this point of view the correct one? Money, money. That was the great force which nothing could resist. And if he could draw endless treasure out of this gold mine, would he not himself be able to believe finally in the omnipotence of his wealth? If the wildest of his whims were no longer to meet any barrier, would not the omnipotence of his money then really become his own? And would he not then reach the point of even believing in himself? This wretched peasant miser gathered the pennies that a strange chance brought him. He, however, had sown the seed. Now the trees were in full bloom. Why should he not pluck the fruits? Undoubtedly, he had deceived himself in thinking that the thing itself would satisfy him. There might be amusing details, but the whole huge swindle would scarcely touch him, and his first enthusiasm was a mere childish blaze of straw. Not for one moment would he be able to believe in his great sorcery. But what merchant, after all, had faith in the mission of his firm? At festive banquets, to be sure, the shipbuilder might chatter in admirable toasts concerning the net of his lines, which spanned the world, United Nations, and carried the fame of his country into the farthest zones. But in reality, he was indifferent to all that. The man wanted to earn money, and his shareholders wanted their dividends. Such was their faith. He knew a good many people who were very skillful at making millions, but he didn't know a one who knew how to spend them well. That was far harder, and he, oh, surely, he would be able to do so. Yes, there was a kingdom in that too. He would. He would. He recollected himself and shook off his dreams. He took up his glass. "Drink, Raimondi, and tell me about it." The innkeeper drank. "Yes, sir," he began. "It is not easy to tell. On the day on which you left, nothing had happened, or at least I observed nothing. I found your note on the table and went upstairs immediately and locked your room." He interrupted himself. "Oh, I believe your bed hasn't been made yet." "I haven't even looked," Frank Braun answered. "Teresa usually made it up. Didn't she go into my room again?" The old man shook his head. "No, she hasn't been there. I had the key in my pocket, and she didn't even ask for it. I'll have to make the bed myself now." He was going to get up, but Frank Braun restrained him. There is plenty of time for that, he said. I'll have to hire a maid, Ramonde growled thoughtfully. Angelo is no good for any inside work. He's capable only in the field and in the stable. And I can't count on Teresa any longer now. I want to establish a bar in front of the house, too, because only a part of the people can get in. It will pay. I have thought of the fat Maria, Opal's daughter, but it will be better if I don't take a girl from this village. They think of nothing but their pious nonsense. I'll drive to the city and hire a real knowing wench, an impudent one who won't be so easily infected by these psalm singers. Frank Braun grew impatient. For heaven's sake, hire whom you want to, Ramonde, but tell me about it. The landlord sucked at his pipe and spat thoughtfully. All right, sir, as you please. As I said, nothing happened on that day. Teresa came down very late, and I scolded her, but she answered nothing, did her work as usual, and kept silent. Didn't she ask after me? No, sir, I told her that you had gone away for a few days, but she didn't ask where. She didn't speak of you once the whole time. He looked at Braun watchfully, then he went on. That is to say, she really didn't speak at all, at least not to me, only to those brethren and sisters. In the evening she went there to Mr. Peters' hall, for they have big meetings there every evening now, and Teresa goes every evening. She came back late, even later than with the night before. But I was lying awake and heard her come up the stairs. Next day passed the same way, only she worked but little, and mostly stayed in her room and read. Frank Braun asked, what did she read? I don't know, said the landlord. I paid no attention to it. I called her to some work, and since she didn't hear, I went to fetch her. There she sat on her bed, and read so eagerly that she didn't even hear me enter. In the evening, she joined the devil hunters again. So it went the next day and the next, until Friday. Until Friday? Yes, it happened on Friday. She didn't come down, and when finally I went to look after her, I found her sick in bed. I asked what I could do for her, but she didn't answer and merely shook her head. So I let her be. What happened then, I don't know. I sent up Angelo with her dinner, but she refused it. Finally, toward evening, I heard her call him. I thought she wanted to eat now, but she sent him for the American. He came and stayed with her for over an hour. Then he came down and made me a long speech, but I didn't understand much because he spoke too softly. I asked whether he didn't want to take something, and then he began to shout. Well, it ended by my kicking him out, but at the end of 15 minutes he came back, and with him came Veneer and Ranchi and the Olpos and others. There were several women with them too. I didn't want to let them in and kept the door locked, but Girolamo Scuro cried that he would break the door. He said that I was imprisoning their sister and that she must be liberated. Finally, the American acted as a mediator and said that they would all drink something if I had some milk. Then I opened the door and gave them milk. They all ran upstairs immediately, and I followed them. Teresa was lying on her bed. She was ill. That much was certain. They showed me her hands, which bled gently on both sides, as though they had been pierced by a needle, and it was the same thing with her feet. I went down and got some sublimate and some surgical cotton. The psalm singers didn't want me to, but I washed the wounds. They wouldn't, of course, let me bandage them, but the wound in her side I bandaged, in spite of their protest. The wounds, by the way, are not dangerous and not all at all deep. The wounds, by the way, are not dangerous and not at all deep. Only the skin is injured and oozes a little blood. That's about all. Frank Braun asked, and what happened on the next day? Oh. No, not oh. On the next, nothing special. The wounds remained. Otherwise, she grew better. She got up, but stayed mostly in her room. The American, whom they now call the Prophet Elijah, with the help of several women, rearranged her room, and now they drag the whole crowd here every evening. After that, they all proceed to the meeting hall, and there Teresa performs some extra tricks for them. Well, I'm agreeable so long as it brings custom into the house. Frank Braun bit his lips in order not to burst out. This father seemed repulsive to him. What kind of tricks? He asked. I don't know, the landlord growled, and I don't want to know anything. I don't give a damn. She can go about her follies alone. Frank Braun looked at him sharply. Look here, Ramonde, what's your real opinion about these strange wounds of your daughter's? Again the landlord spat. Real opinion? Oh, well, I haven't any. I want no dealings with the whole business. They are to leave me alone. I want to sell my wine or milk and fruit syrup. If the devil hunters like that better, and there's an end to it. He laughed broadly. But I'll tell you one thing. I was a soldier for 15 years, and I know many fellows hack off one joint of their thumb or index finger in order to escape service, or they boil a mixture of cinquefoil and laurel leaves. It's a favorite method, especially in our mountain valleys. Then, when they come to be examined, their eyes stare and their hearts work like steam engines. But our doctors are pretty sly and not easily to be taken in by such swindlers. Frank Braun got up. The landlord disgusted him more and more. And you suspect your daughter of such an action? He waited for no answer, but hurried out. He ran up the stairs and opened Teresa's room. The air was sultry, heavy with incense, and the odor of dirty, perspiring people. He forced himself behind the canopy, opened the window wide, and let a good draught blow through. All the furniture had been moved out into the hall. Only the bed still stood close by the door, and beside it one small chair. There he saw his books lying. He took them up and turned their pages. Everywhere he found little saints' pictures used as bookmarks. It was obvious that Teresa had read the books zealously. Here and there he found little marginal remarks scribbled by her hand in pencil. Oh, yes, she had prepared herself, even though somewhat differently from the way her father believed. He sat down on the bed and thought intently. Here he had sat before he went away. Here he had dropped the first poison into her heart. Poison? Was it poison because it issued from his lips? Was it not possible that he offered her supreme happiness? Thus he had spoken to her, and can one not speak truths which in one's own person one regards as lies? Or rather, a thing might be a lie and a truth at the same time, even as virtue and sin are one thing. A lie to him, a truth to him, and yet one. How had it come about? How did his wild lies assume a form and rush forth? Living and strong, full of abysmal power, he pondered. He had spoken to her long of all the saints, of their lives and miracles. He had read to her and told her of ecstasies and of visions, and of the strange grace of the stigmata. Her soul had been stirred up by all she had heard and seen in the American's hall, and had very certainly become receptive to everything miraculous, and her faith, always great and strong, now grew into the immeasurable through her love of him and through all the unheard of things that her eyes had seen and her ears heard. Oh, surely her body was well prepared for any miracle. Then he gave her his suggestion, and she accepted it. She was hypnotically sensitive and hysterical enough, and he had not doubted for a moment that she would do everything he had commanded. But then he had put her to sleep again and had revoked all that. He had abrogated his commands and told her to forget everything. In waking and sleeping, it was to have been quenched and annihilated in her memory, and never more to gleam in the still ashes of consumed recollection. He recalled that she had not answered. Oh, yes, he knew instances enough in which an excellent medium, at other times a mere puppet in its master's hands, suddenly refused to carry out some command wholly opposed to its innermost feeling. He also knew other rare cases in which a post-hypnotic command once given took firm root in the brain of the medium and could be pushed out by no new suggestion. Might it not be so here? Might not the girl have carried out this command that appealed to her profoundly, even against her later will? But what had happened was, under these circumstances, different from his suggestion. What Ramonde had told him did indeed contain his thought in large quantities, and yet differed in all details. It was much quieter and simpler, and wholly lacking in the mad flourishes and arabesques of his imagination. No, no, such as it was now, it was not his work. What remained his was the thought. But another had built the temple, another, Teresa herself. A miracle? No, it wasn't that even yet. To be sure, she stood quite on the level now with Maria of Morel, with Saint Teresa, with Katerina Emmerich, with Marguerite Alacoque, and with Louise Lateau, with all the sainted women of whom he had told her. At bottom, there was very little difference. Only one small word needed to be changed. Autosuggestion instead of suggestion from without. That was all. Yes, that was all, but was that really all? All. Had she not done the monstrous, had she not fanned the flame of her fervent faith to such a fire that it leaped from her brain and burned brightly before the eyes of all? Nervously he bit his nails. He held the secret in the palm of his hand, and yet he could not seize it. He understood the growth of this miracle to its ultimate fiber, and just because he understood it, it had to remain barren forever. He could toil and exert himself, could shape some very simple things in his brain and give it life and power, and yet it was always locked in his skull and could never come out and become an independent entity. There lay the rigid frontier, and only fate could cross it. But she crossed this bridge with a light tread. Wherever he penetrated this mysterious new land, it was bright and thoroughly known to him. But she remained in the unconscious and wandered with the security of sleep into that which lay beyond. When he wanted to gaze beyond the narrow boundaries of nature, he had to dig in alien brains. Only there could blossom the miracle which she created. And so he ran in a circle, for all the unearthly became of the clearest earthliness under his sharp eye. Damn it. Never spill water on a 100-year-old book. But she created in blindness and walked into the dreamland of all mist. She carried all the unconscious into life, and thus her life became supernatural in the midst of the earthly. Thus was her past. That was it. She had no soul. She was lacking in the full consciousness of the antithesis between the ego and the external world. So she was one with all the not herself, and therefore she was in God. In truth, she herself was God. That was the solution of the mystery, the old eternal truth of the mystic. Truth? Surely not for him. But though it remained a great lie to the cognitive intellect, yet it remained no less a truth for him who believed. And she believed. It was her truth. She was one with God, and so the miracle took place. 1 hour passed after another. He heard the clock in the guest room strike heavily. Night had fallen, and yet he was sitting on her bed. Then he heard voices and footfalls in front of the house. He stood up hastily and went over into his room. He heard the door open and close, went to the window, and saw people going home. He recognized no one, but now the sound of steps came from the stairs. He stood in the doorway and listened. Two walked there. He recognized the girl's tread. Who was the other? They did not speak, but he heard them opening the door of her room. Both went in, and neither came out. Who was the other? Frank Braun trembled. He gnawed his lips and stamped his feet. He ran through the room with long strides. The devil! How did it concern him who the other was? Was he perhaps jealous of Teresa? He laughed. He went to the table, lit a lamp, and sat down. But he could not endure that long. Who was with the girl? Who stayed with her by night? Pietro Nascler? The blood rose in his temple. He? He laughed bitterly. So it was for this that he had played with fire, to roast the prophet's chestnuts for him. It was for this that he had drawn the storms from heaven, that in their fog this stenchful psalm singer might kiss her sweet body with his slimy lips. Was that the banal end of his mighty dream? He ran out and rattled violently at the doorknob. It was locked. He beat against it with his fists. Open, he cried. If you don't open, I'll break in the door. He heard a gentle whispering, but nothing stirred. Open, he roared. Open. Still, there came no answer. Then he hurled himself against the door. The lock was broken out of its socket. One more thrust, and the door flew wide open. Two great candles were burning. In their light, he saw Teresa lying on the bed, her hand clasping the crucifix. On the floor, at the foot of the bed, crouched little Gino. Her glance met his. "What do you want?" she asked softly. Frank Braun did not answer. He closed the door as best he could and then tottered to his own room. Violence, buddy. All right, that's all. 55 minutes of that. Goodbye, bros.